Hello and welcome to Total IELTS, and in today's video I'll be looking at the speaking 7 common myths in no particular order. Now all these myths I've heard from either students, teachers and of course online sources. So let's kick off. So first one up is non-native speaker examiners are stricter than native speakers. This is a very common myth. I've heard this a lot from students and even some teachers. And when they say stricter, that means these non-native speaker examiners are stricter when it comes to lexical resource and grammar grading. In fact, I once met a candidate who the night before her test actually hoped and prayed that she would get a native speaker examiner. However, there's no evidence to support this myth. There's been no study or research by IELTS or Cambridge into this topic. All speaking examiners receive the same training, monitoring and evaluation. And this applies to native and non-native speakers. As for the training, examiners receive training either from the British Council or IDP. And all examiners are retrained after 2 years. Monitoring and evaluation. The tests are all recorded and checked, especially when the speaking score is higher or lower than the other test scores. This is called a jagged profile. And examiners are evaluated periodically, and an official report is sent to Cambridge examinations. IELTS are incredibly strict. They need to ensure all examiners conduct the same standardized test in terms of timing, question types in parts 1, 2 and 3. And most of all, they grade correctly. And of course, this applies to all examiners. So it's really not worth worrying who your examiner is going to be, because they all grade the same. And number 2 on the list is I should be friendly and dress very smartly for my speaking test. Some students believe that it's a good way to impress the examiner, to be incredibly friendly and dress smartly. However, examiners are only impressed by candidates who score very well according to the band descriptors and not by their friendly behavior or the way they dress. However, to be fair, for a lot of students, it is important to look good, which makes them feel confident. But let's remember, there is no IELTS dress code. It's a language test, not a fashion test. So wear whatever makes you feel confident and comfortable, and don't dress for the beach. And number 3 is I will get penalized if I ask the examiner to repeat the question. Students often ask about penalties in the speaking test, but the truth is there are no penalties and no minimum scores. You are graded only according to the public band descriptors. However, students do feel sometimes reluctant to ask the examiner to repeat the question because they already believe they're going to be penalized, or it might annoy the examiner. However, you should always ask for clarification when you don't fully understand the question. And don't answer a question if you don't fully understand it. You can learn some useful phrases like "Excuse me, can you say that again?" or "Can you repeat that please?" How the examiner repeats the question depends on the different parts of the test. In part 1, the examiner can only repeat the question word for word. This is because it's an IELTS regulation. So the examiner will usually repeat the question twice, and if you still don't understand, they will move on to the next question. In part 2, after you finish speaking about your topic, there will be a follow-up question. If you don't understand this one, the examiner will repeat it word for word. In part 3, the questions aren't scripted, so if you don't understand, the examiner can rephrase the question by using paraphrase or synonyms, and sometimes they will even give you some examples. So, when you don't understand, don't be shy, always ask. And number 4 is I should speak in a British accent to get a good pronunciation score. This is one of the strangest myths I've heard from students, and when I asked them why particularly a British accent, their answer always was because the British Council owns the IELTS test. Well, it is true the British Council is one of 3 test partners, but that also includes University of Cambridge Examinations and IDP Australia. So since IDP is Australian, why not an Australian accent? Your accent only matters when it makes it difficult for the examiner to understand what you're saying. For example, according to the speaking band descriptors, band 6, your pronunciation can generally be understood throughout. And indeed, band 8, you are easy to understand throughout, and your L1 accent, that's your native accent, has minimal effect on intelligibility. There's no mention of British, American, or even Australian accents in the band descriptors. So, the reality is, you don't need a British accent to score well in pronunciation. And coming in at number 5 is, I should use lots of idioms to score well. Using idioms can be a double-edged sword, and that idiom means it can have either a positive or negative effect. Idioms can have a positive effect on your score in the lexical resource criterion. Indeed, Band 7 says, uses some less common and idiomatic vocabulary. However, the negative effect is when they are used inaccurately. So when you do use idioms, you should know the exact meaning and the context. Also, don't overuse them, as this will sound unnatural. Overall, using idioms can either be positive or negative, and this depends on how accurately and naturally you use them. And moving on to number 6, and it's accurate grammar is very important to achieve a good score. Grammatical range and accuracy account for only 25% of the overall band score, so it should not be valued more than the other criteria. You don't need perfect grammar to score well. Mistakes are acceptable and they naturally occur, even for native speakers. It's still possible to achieve a good score without perfect grammar. For example, Band 7 says frequently produces error-free sentences, though some grammatical mistakes persist. So grammatical accuracy should never be valued more than the other criteria. And finally, number 7, friendly examiners give higher scores. This is a typical comment many candidates make, After their speaking test, they say things like the examiner was friendly or unfriendly. If the examiner is believed to be unfriendly, then the word quickly gets around the test center, and this in turn can increase the candidate's feelings of anxiety. What they usually mean by unfriendly is that the examiner didn't smile much or didn't keep eye contact. Examiners are in fact trained to be friendly and professional, but not over-friendly, as this can give candidates the wrong impression. Examiners are not even allowed to say anything encouraging or positive, such as good or that's fine. This can lead candidates to feel that they are unfriendly. Examiners also don't maintain eye contact because they're usually reading from their booklet to prepare the next question, and they are always checking the timing. But let's be realistic and remember that this is a professional and important test. It's not a social occasion. The mood of the examiner has absolutely no effect on your speaking test score.